Good. I'm hearing what you're saying about Andrew Jackson here, and I'm almost seeing some parallels, between Andrew Jackson, being seen as this common man's president, and in a more modern sense, Donald Trump, for example. Now, in Donald Trump's case as the common man's president, I do think that could be considered more of a facade than it is necessarily in Jackson's case. So I'm kind of curious what your take is on Donald Trump, as some type of neo-Jackson type of figure, or how the movement associated with him would compare to what you've laid out here as, as Jacksonian democracy.
I think there are definitely some parallels. Steve Bannon in particular has sort of leaned into that, and of course Trump had a portrait of Jackson in the Oval Office with him. Um, and so I think very much having that sort of rock star celebrity sort of figure, there is some overlap there. Um, I think the biggest difference, or for one, but Jackson was a lot more effective at wielding power, which as to Trump's discredit. Um, he was also surrounded by people that had a very serious political worldview that they were trying to implement with the power that Jackson had. Whereas I think Trump, I think Steve Bannon, while there's plenty of areas where I disagree with him, I think he's a serious thinker. I think he had a very ambitious sort of worldview that he was fighting for. I think a lot of the people in modern politics that Trump's issue is that he was very easy to, he continues to be very easy to flatter. Whereas Jackson was much more, I think, a man of principle. He kind of very much had a sort of that kind of a great early, Scotch American or Scotch Irish sort of, uh, you know, hardiness to him. Um, and so Jackson surrounded himself with people that shared his ideas. Trump surrounded himself with people that flattered Trump. And so you kind of had a rush to the bottom of, who could kiss his butt the best. And you end up having very talented people on the outs of that, because they're kind of lows that people around him would go to that they wouldn't. And so he ended up having a lot of the kind of the old swamp crowd that were willing to kind of play that game because they're desperate to maintain power for the sake of maintaining power. And so I think what you need is a similar sort of populist figure that can have that sort of Trump style impact, but is surrounded by people who really have an agenda, who are committed to substantive ideas. And maybe if he ends up winning again, maybe I think he would have better people around him, in part just because of kind of a self-filtering mechanism. And I think his Trump's attacks on the credibility of elections, which I think are extremely valid. I do think the 2020 election had many of the issues there. That I think he's driven away a lot of the worst people around him because of that. You have institutions that have been built in the current era to kind of help with the hiring side of things. Conservative Partners is one, which I've had some friends in that take issues seriously. I'm not going to say that they're fully Rothbardian libertarian, but they've got some credible people there. Heritage Foundation has taken some major steps in the right direction. They've changed in foreign policy a good amount. They have a lot of Austrian economists working within their orbit right now. So if typically you have like in the Heritage Foundation ends up filing in for Republican administrative jobs when you have when you have a Republican president. So there might be an uptick there in quality and the like. And I also think Trump's kind of anger over prosecution might pay out some dividends when it comes to the deep state and things like that. So I'm not ruling out any hope that a potential Trump 2.0 won't be better than Trump 1.0. But I think ultimately Trump has some weaknesses that for Jackson, who had plenty of areas to disagree with Jackson himself. I think Jackson was motivated by more than his own vanity. And I think that's definitely something that very much fuels Trump. And so, it requires people around him to navigate those in ways that you didn't have to quite do with Jackson. But I think ultimately, given how broken the system is, given that we have, this democratic system, like it or not, that America has, in order to have meaningful political success, it's going to require a Trump-like figure that is interested in promoting a solid agenda. And that's why, again, I think the Javier Milei example in Argentina is very fascinating, because he is kind of a combination. If I were to pull two people that he reminds me of, it's kind of a mix of Trump and Peter Schiff. He was an economic commentator, kind of doing a Peter Schiff sort of thing, decrying the state of the Argentinian economy. And then he became this sort of right-wing bomb thrower, not giving up those ideas, but kind of leaning into a similar sort of aesthetic that Trump has. And now you're seeing him as, again, the overwhelming favorite for that political office. So, a Javier Milei for America, I think ultimately would be necessary for making the big changes that we need. But again, I think even there, there's some parallels between that and kind of a Jacksonian figure.